Well, welcome to all of you. It's really delightful to see you. And I want to encourage participation. Now, I've some of you who have taken these conversations with me in the past know all about the the Zoom Sparkle, right? So if you like something, please smile and do this. And you can unmute yourself. If you have a question, I would appreciate you just like sort of raising your hand and waving, and we'll try and call on you because this is very freewheeling. This is not a formal presentation at all. It's just a conversation between myself and two wonderful local artists who were involved in the production in 2018 of All Is Calm. So we'll be talking about that. And I think we might as well just get started. So, just a brief introduction, and that is that this is the second pandemic um, drive-in presentation of opera for San Diego Opera. How many of you went to La Boheme at the sports arena? Yeah, and it was a really different experience. It was challenging in some ways, certainly for the production team, but I thought it was tremendously successful. I enjoyed it immensely. I'll just tell you a brief story. I had in my car with me a young guest who's a tenor entering his senior year at San Diego State, and we connected on Facebook. And I said, "Look, if you don't have a ticket, come with me because I've got an extra seat, passenger seat. Come on." And the the most fun I've had at the opera in a long time was enjoying watching him enjoy La Boheme. And being a tenor, he knew almost every note of Rodolfo. So he was very quietly singing along with Rodolfo on stage, and I was just getting a huge kick out of it. He was so appreciative, and it was so much fun to be able to be in that enclosed space and be able to whisper to each other and talk a little bit about the production, about the music, and yeah, it was just a lot of fun. So drive in. Um, all is calm. This is a perfect seasonal offering because, of course, it does have a Christmas theme. And this will be at the Del Mar Fairgrounds on the 21st of December. I believe that's a Monday night. I should have checked. Monday night, the 21st at 7 o'clock. So it's the same deal. Drive in. Prices are available, of course, on our website, so you'll get that readily available to you. Come a little early. The members of the San Diego Opera Chorus will also be doing some live caroling, and we'll be able to do some caroling from our cars, which would be kind of fun. But of course, the main event is the video that KPBS shot of our 2018 production of All Is Calm at the Balboa Theater. Now, you may know that All Is Calm is based on that incredible spontaneous event at the beginning of the First World War. The First World War, of course, began in August 1914, and by the time we get to Christmas time, get to Christmas Eve 1914, many of those boys had been in the trenches for many months. It was rainy and awful and horrible, and life in the trench, if you've done any research on this at all, was just ghastly, absolutely ghastly. And rather spontaneously, up and down the front, groups of men on both sides declared a kind of truce for 24 hours, for virtually 24 hours, from Christmas Eve into Christmas Day. And the stories about what happened during those spontaneously declared truces are just extraordinary, of singing Christmas carols across the lines, and those trenches were close enough to each other that they could hear a man cough in the German trench if they were on the English side, on the Allied side. They were very, very close. And of course, in no man's land, there were bodies of their compatriots, some brothers, relatives, fellow soldiers who had died and they weren't able to retrieve the bodies. So this was also an opportunity for them to do that and bring the bodies back to the trenches so that they could be transported for proper burial. Um, and of course, the officers were furious. The national leaders, international leaders of the countries involved were furious. I think the only person this pleased was the Pope, who sort of unilaterally declared a truce that nobody paid any attention to earlier in December that year. But the men did, and it wasn't official. And it was spontaneous and broke out in different places all along that line of demarcation. It's a really incredible story about the human spirit um, coming out supreme over warfare and over battle. So that's what the piece is about, and I've invited two artists who were intimately involved in our 2018 production of All Is Calm to join us for a kind of panel discussion about All Is Calm, as well as some other things that they might be doing and have in their pockets during this time. So I'd like first of all to introduce to you the artistic director of the choral group Sacra Profana, as well as the director of music ministries at the Village Presbyterian Church in Rancho Santa Fe. That is Juan Carlos Acosta. Juan, welcome.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
Talking to us from his studio uh, a little south of here, I think, where you are.
Yep.
And on the other hand, we've got Vanessa Dinning, actress, um, cellist extraordinaire, songstress, a native Brit, and and she is the go-to dialect and accent coach, vocal coach in town for anybody that's dealing with anything dealing with dialect. So Vanessa Dinning, welcome to you as well.
Thank you.
It's really, really good to see you here. And I keep wanting to refer to where you actually were born and grew up because I know you also have a deep and abiding love of choral music emanating from one of the great cathedrals
Well,
in,
yes, indeed.
in England, and that was
That's Durham.
Durham.
Yeah, right
Durham
up in the
Cathedral.
north, top northeast corner.
And that's where you grew up, right? And I can't imagine, I can't imagine how wonderful it would have been to have lived within walking or a short
Uh,
drive distance to
I could
Durham
drive past it every day on my way to school. It's like
and to
Catholic
be able
Cathedral, right there.
to experience that extraordinary English choir tradition in that great cathedral. How
Yeah.
exciting. So good to have you here. Good to have you both here. I'd like to talk about the origins of All Is Calm. First of all, the origins of the piece itself. It was developed first by the founding director of Theater Latte Da. That's latte as in your coffee latte dash da in Minneapolis. The cleverest name for a theater that I've ever heard in my life. I think is just charming. And that was Peter Rothstein and two of his musical cohorts who began work on this piece in the mid 2000s, and its first incarnation was in 2007, I believe, was the very first production of this piece. You can imagine it because it's made up of songs of the period, so trench songs, patriotic songs, Christmas carols, obviously, but from the traditions of all of the men involved on both sides, and readings from official documents of the period, military documents, letters home of the soldiers. I mean, it's an extraordinary sort of docu-musical in a way. Juan Carlos, talk a little bit about how it came to San Diego and your involvement in it from the beginning of that, which I believe was what 2016. Is that
Yes.
right?
Yes. Yeah. You have it exactly right. The musical component for that, the two composers, arrangers of the piece, are part of the founding directors of Cantus, which is a professional men's choir comparable to Chanticleer, based in Minneapolis. And so the whole team kind of developed the piece, and it happened that Chad Frisk, who's frequent performer on the San Diego Opera stage, a longtime chorus member and former ensemble member for San Diego Opera, was friends with one of the guys in Cantus, and they had been talking about this piece for a couple of years. And Chad and I were in a production. I was music directing production of Amal and the Night Visitors, and he said, I've got this other great Christmas piece. We should take a look at it. And so he brought the piece to me and to Bodhi Tree and got us connected and said, we've got to find a way to produce this piece. And
Now, Bodhi Tree, excuse me, we have to mention Bodhi Tree is another arts producing or music producing nonprofit in San Diego that do 4 or 5 events a year, I think, from concerts to classical concerts to jazz. I was involved as a pianist with the Schubertiade that they did earlier this year. They're a wonderful organization as well. So Chad was and you got together Sacra Profana with Bodhi Tree.
Yeah, and they really helped facilitate all of those different components. The original production, well, it was originally envisioned as a radio play, essentially, and with the chorus was a musical component kind of unto itself, and then there were actors, 3 or 4, I think, in the original one, that read the lines that we hear, the spoken dialogue, and so over the years that kind of morphed into the singers also becoming actors who had lines that kind of were traded back and forth. So our first year, Sacra Profana was the choral component, and then we had singers from San Diego Opera that were Bodhi Tree, affiliated artists who were doing both the speaking part and a lot of the solo work. So we kind of did this hybrid production of it. But yeah, it was a fantastic introduction to the piece.
Yeah, and you performed the piece at the Veterans Museum
Mm-hmm.
in Balboa Park, which is the old Navy chapel at the Naval Hospital. And I had the opportunity to see it. Actually, I was there with David Bennett that night. And I don't think it was the opening night. I think it was the second night that we saw it. Now, I was just bowled over. I did not know what to expect of this piece at all. I just knew everybody in it.
Yeah, that's right.
So, I'm going to go support my folks. And I was bowled over at how touching it was. It really, I think, grabbed everybody in the audience. How many were involved? How many singers were there on stage?
That's a good question. I believe we had 10 members of Sacra Profana in the chorus, and then I think 6 kind of what we call principal artists at that time. I think more or less that was kind of the breakdown.
And I hate to start listing names, but yeah, Chad Frisk, Michael Sokol,
Walter
Bernardo
Dumel, Chris
Bermudez,
Stevens. Yep. Yep.
Chris Stevens,
Yep.
all the usual suspects,
Exactly. Yep.
all these guys who have been involved with San Diego Opera Chorus for a long time, and other singers who, Walter Dumel, who's the
Yep.
artistic director of Bodhi Tree. So yeah, it was they were all local artists, but it was done at a level of professionalism that was really striking.
Mm-hmm.
And you conducting it, and of course them having experience with you as the artistic director of Sacra Profana, it was a marriage made in heaven. I mean, it just worked so well and so seamlessly. Vanessa, I have to ask you, were you involved with All Is Calm at that time in that incarnation with Sacra Profana?
Yeah, I was. I knew Bodhi Tree because I had been in the Gilbert and Sullivan's. They do like a sing-along Gilbert and Sullivan annually, and I'd been in a couple of those. And it was funny. It must have been around the same time Chad had talked to Juan. So we were having a break one day in rehearsal, like having a little, cup of tea or whatever. And Chad was like, because I was helping them with the British accents in, not a lot, but a little bit in the Gilbert and Sullivan's. And Chad's like, oh, is it just because you're British? And I'm like, no, I went to school to do this. And he's like, oh, so you know other accents? And I'm like, yeah. And so that's kind of how that came about. And so he's like, we've got this really cool piece that you'd be really good on. And then I was like, fantastic. And then I didn't hear about it for a whole year. And then Diana called me up earlier in 2016 and was like, what are you doing in later this year? And I'm like, what are your dates? Yeah, that'll work. And so I didn't know the piece or the history of the piece until really we started rehearsing. And then they sent it to me as a score and a script. And I sort of hadn't heard it at all, but looking at it was like, whoa, there's a lot in here. And so I was thrilled to be able to join from the first rehearsal.
Yeah, because there are, as I said, patriotic songs from the period, like A Long Way to Tipperary and Keep the Home Fires Burning, and what else? Gosh, my brain is.
I feel like a whole list in front of me.
And there's like 33 different musical episodes in the work, and there are French pieces and German and Austrian, and there's even a little doesn't the Pope speak at one point? There's something.
Yeah, so, there's one line in Italian, which is
one line in Italian.
It's in English,
then a whole bunch of British dialects from low to high, and a lot of people and folks in the middle. So we'll talk about that later. But this must have been extraordinary. Juan, what was the reaction from most of the audience immediately after each of those shows? Because at the Veterans Museum, there's no backstage. You all kind of have to stick around and greet the audience. What sort of reactions did you get in that first production?
Like any great piece of theater, the range of emotions experienced in the piece is so wide. And it was amazing. We knew we had a great piece, to work with. We knew that we were really onto something, but to get it in front of an audience is a totally different experience because, you hear when they breathe in with this element of, that they're touched, or they sigh, or, they giggle or guffaw even in places that we didn't expect. And so as a performer, it's just so, honestly, and really something that I miss so greatly about not being able to perform for people, because that connection to the audience. And so we had some great reactions and people coming up to us and saying, "Oh, I had a family member who served," or "I was, in a war, not obviously not World War I, but in a war, and this spoke so much to my experience." So that was a really great part about being able to present this piece in the way that we have done it before. And even when we performed it in the Balboa, I think I was sitting about 2 rows into the audience, the way our setup was. And so I was still able to kind of, conduct and experience that piece alongside people. So a really touching experience.
Yeah, I was one of the people that was sort of alongside you. I was
That's right.
In the first row, right behind you, and so and they thrust the stage out over what would normally be the pit,
right,
so that the men would be right at the edge of the stage and have an intimate connection with the audience. So that was striking. I don't want to get ahead of myself, but how did the production under the auspices of San Diego Opera come about in 2018 then?
Well, as you probably know, Diana and David worked together in Gotham Opera.
And Diana being the co-artistic director of Bodhi Tree, right?
Correct. Yes. And so they had a relationship that went years back, and David, right when he came to town, immersed himself in the local performing arts. He came to Sacra Profana concerts long before we were connected to any production, and he obviously came to the production that we did at the Balboa, or that at the Veterans Museum. And so, he was aware of the piece, aware of our work on that. And when the opportunity presented itself, that we could program it alongside them. And by the way, I should mention that they were a producing partner right from the beginning. We have used San Diego Opera costumes, a lot of the set pieces. I sang in opera chorus for about 10 years and went to San Diego State for my undergrad. And we shared a lot of those same set pieces. So we joke about the same barrels and the same, crates end up in several different productions. So for those of you who are familiar with San Diego opera productions, you'll probably recognize some of those elements. And so they have been gracious in sharing resources with us from the beginning. And so they had been alongside us this whole time. And when we had the opportunity to take it literally to a larger stage and share it with a bigger audience, we jumped at that opportunity. So that was a great opportunity
Yeah,
for
I
us.
was very excited. I was a little worried that in a larger space, because the Veterans Museum maybe sat 200 people,
Mm-hmm.
uh, add 1,000 people to that in the Balboa, even though the Balboa seems to us a small theater in comparison to the Civic, which is 3,000 seats. I was a little worried that we'd lose some of the intimacy, but I didn't feel that we did at all. It felt very immediate and engrossing and engaging. Vanessa, I'm curious. Let's let's start with the distinction between accent and dialect. Can you address that a little bit? Because I want folks to understand just how complex a chore this was for everybody involved in the production.
Yeah, absolutely. So the simple answer to that is that accent is pronunciation, and is regional, but pronunciation, and dialect is that, but it's also the cultural. So it's how the accent came about, all the different influences, but also what's the what's the class of the people that you're dealing. Like, if I take an example of something like the Geordie accent, which is where I grew up in Durham in the Northeast. If you guys have ever seen Billy Elliot, that's the one we're talking about. So we're in the Northeast of England. So the accent there has so many different influences. It has some influences from Scotland coming down, but it has an enormous influence from centuries back with the Vikings. Those Viking ships coming across the North Sea in the 700, 800s, 900s. And so a lot of the words in the vernacular in that area, and even the people's names, all the sons like Robson, Johnson, Thompson, they're all that sort of thing. But you also in that accent get even all these years later, all these hundreds of years later, still get that Scandinavian in the Geordie accent today. But that area is also very, very well known, or at the time, especially for hundreds of years, really, until the 1980s. Coal mining was the primary source of income and the primary job that most people did. And so it was very working class, physical labor. And so the accent has a physicality to it, and a sort of almost not in a negative way, but a sort of aggression to it and a pride to it that comes through too, which is a cultural thing that is passed on from generation to generation to generation. And so the accents and the dialects, I should say, develop over a long period of time with all these different influences. Geography also is a huge influence. If you think of what the weather is like in the deep south, and how the accent and not just the accent, but the rhythms and the paces move the way the weather and the landscape does, as opposed to somewhere like Manhattan, which is much faster and energetic, and you can't stop because someone's going to take, so it's knowing stuff like that as well. So for this particular piece, it was interesting because we had to display people and present not just characters, but real people who actually existed, because they were speaking words that were written by actual soldiers who fought in the war, of all different echelons of society, from the lowest squaddy up to aristocracy. We get Winston Churchill in there as well. So it was just different levels of social class. And of course, in the UK or England or Britain at that time, social class was huge distinctions. It's much less now, but very, very big at the time. And also different levels of military ranking. And so we were using the accents and the dialect really for the audiences, not just to be able to differentiate the characters, but also to help tell the story. So the way they spoke helped the audience decode, who is this person, what do they do, what is their place. So it's that sort of thing.
And you had to do that with 16 different singers, but as Alan Hicks, who was the stage director of this production, told me in a podcast, for those over those 16 singing actors, he had 124 separate assignments for each actor.
Yeah,
So some of those guys had to go from Cockney to German,
right. Yeah.
right? In a
Yeah,
flash.
it was interesting. I mean, I spent when Alan was casting it with the actors for the SDO production, and I was very fortunate to be able to be part of the audition process, just to listen. And we made they didn't the actors who came, or the singers who came to audition for this piece, obviously had to sing because it's an opera company, but we also gave them little side speeches and excerpts from the spoken word sections, not just to say, can they act? It wasn't about that really. It was more about, have a go at an accent. Can you take a note? What do they bring? So I could say, oh, I think this person's going to be great in this, or let's keep them away from that, but definitely move them in this area. And so all of the actors played many characters or took on the different personas, but we tried to keep them in areas that were their strengths. But also on top of that, they also had to fit what their voice parts were for the singing. So it was this sort of like 5D, 6D jigsaw that were like, you know, two tenor lines, two bass lines that sometimes split. Plus, are they English now? Are they German now? Are they French now? Are they upper class now? Are they lower class now? And then kind of like, what do they look like? You know, can we believe this person is playing Winston Churchill? Can we believe this person is playing a squaddy physically? And so there's all these different moving parts to kind of bring together and make the machine work. So
I just wanted you to give us a little something of that, because when you see All Is Calm, it looks literally like All Is Calm. It looks like the simplest production, because there's only one set. And not a lot happens exciting in terms of, like, the setting, and the blocking is very simple, and you group them together for a choral moment, and then you have single, guys standing and reciting their lines or singing a solo. It seems simple, but it's not at all. I want to read. There are a couple of things in the chats. First of all, that from Peter, that Bodhi Tree, the organization, donates the proceeds of all their productions to local charities. They try to connect the musical content of what they're doing to a local charity, which is really extraordinary. And yeah, Bodhi Tree is just one of the best ideas to come down the pike in a long, long time, and they're doing great work. And from a fellow Brit, Vanessa, Janet White, who's on our board, she says, as Brits, we were so impressed by the regional accents, they were spot on. So there you go,
They
Van.
did good. Our boys did really good.
There you go.
And to add to the fun of that is, so many of some of them had done spoken word before, but a lot of them were singers who just sing, and were honestly, and I don't mean this to disparage them in any way, because I actually think it's incredibly brave. They'd never done spoken word on stage ever. And so this was the first time they were speaking as opposed to singing. For some of us, that, that's the other way around. Speaking is easier and singing is scary. For them, it was the other way around. And so it was a lot to take on
Yeah.
for those guys. They did amazingly well.
Juan, I'd like you to comment on this, and that is the fact that even a chorus like Sacra Profana, they're not used to being on stage for an hour. This piece is like 65, 70 minutes long. And they're on the entire time, right?
Yeah.
And in a typical chorus, because you were in the San Diego Opera Chorus at one point as well for a number of years, you come out, you do your scene, and you go back to the dressing room, and have a coffee or a beer, or
Oh, yeah.
you can relax a little bit until your next call, which might be 2 acts later, right? But these
Absolutely.
guys are on the entire time.
Yeah, that's one of the things that makes this piece more challenging. is that there, even with the principal role, you can be a principal, singer and have 20-30 minutes worth of music max. You're talking about maybe 2 arias, a couple duets, and an ensemble piece, and then you're done. That's easy to learn. And this show, you have to learn about 20 different choruses, plus your solo lines, plus your speaking lines, and the mental, emotional engagement of being on stage the whole time. I think we had one exit of a character off stage in this production, and then the rest of the time they were on stage. So it's a very different kind of engagement, a true ensemble piece. So it's a lot of fun in that way.
I'm curious, and this is a question for both of you, because as artists, we learn something from every performing experience that we're engaged in. I'd like to ask you, was there one thing that you took away from the experience of All Is Calm that you learned? Like maybe one of those big aha moments or big sort of life-changing things that made you look at your art a little differently, and what might that be? Van, let's start with
Oh
you.
my gosh, so
Yeah.
many things, but I'm trying to think of an aha one. I think, gosh, that's a tough question because there are a lot of things. For me, I work a lot here in San Diego as a dialect coach, obviously, and I do a lot of musical theater as well as straight plays too. And that thing of when we're doing dialect as a spoken word as opposed to dialect as singing, you think would be the same, but it's really not, because you have to do so many other things when you're singing. But it's usually one-on-one. Like if I do like a My Fair Lady, I'm working with the Eliza or the Higgins or the, but with this, I'd done some ensemble stuff like that, but the ensemble work was so precise.
Mm.
I was having to really not that you would approximate, but we were making very detailed decisions about exactly a vowel sound on a specific, because we wanted to keep the feeling of the dialogue and the dialect and the energy of those particular group of men, but also maintain a very true, perfect, beautiful choral sound when it was needed. And so I think the detail of this was heightened so much. And since doing plays and other work since at other theaters, I now push way harder for a higher level of, not for accuracy, it is accuracy, but for precision and why. And so it wasn't that I wasn't thinking it before, but I share it more with the cast so they can understand why. And the result of that is that it's way better.
Mm.
I'm like, oh, that's great. So thank you, Juan, frankly, working with Juan, especially on the ensemble stuff. Like we'd go back and forth about this type of R versus that type of R for hours. And then when it works, you're like, oh, it was that kind of R,
I had the opportunity to go up to the 10th floor at the opera office and experience one of your rehearsals. It was a music rehearsal, but Vanessa was there, stopping every once in a while, and it was one of those old patriotic songs that I knew, but hadn't ever heard sung all the way through, and it was Cockney accent throughout, and the discussions about the dropped H, as well as the ah sound and the
lots
R
of keys.
was
Yeah.
was extraordinarily detailed, and I was just amazed by it. Juan, what about you? What one thing might you have brought away from this experience of All Is Calm that you learned?
Yeah, I think from a musical aspect, it would have been the power of listening. Which is um, obviously it's something we do, but to put it in this context, especially getting opera singers to think like choral musicians and choral musicians to think like opera singers, and for all of us to think like straight play actors. The listening, both musically but also emotionally engaged in the piece, is a very significant thing. And exactly like Vanessa was saying, when people truly listen and make adjustments to each other, those moments that we had where things just rang, that was the proof that was far better than any kind of sermon I could give about, okay, you have to listen here and you have to make that adjustment. When they did it and could hear for themselves what that was like, was really a special moment, and certainly things that will live with me. I think as a human being, this piece continues to teach me, and I think the aha element for me was the fact that music brought these people together. It was the singing that got them out of their trenches, and then they started singing back and forth, and one to another. That was pretty magical, and the reminder that these people who were literally trying to kill each other came together for a moment and found that peace. It makes these differences that we have between each other seem quite petty, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
And so that's a great reminder, and one of the reasons why I feel compelled to be doing this piece every year, because it's a constant reminder that that there are things bigger than us, and that we can find common ground.
Yeah, I hate to call it a teaching piece, but because it is a wonderful piece of art, but it does teach while it's entertaining and uplifting. There are so many things to be taken away when you come away from it. There's so many things that you reflect on and learn and think about. It's really extraordinary. I'd like to just talk to both of you a little bit about being an artist during the pandemic. I've been reflecting an awful lot on what it's done for me, and I've, as those of you who have been following these occasional Wednesday conversations, I wrote an entire opera in March and April. I've started another one, the other one, and a piece that I wrote before that are both going to be produced on the Detour series by San Diego Opera, which is exciting. So David and I are talking a lot about details and when and all of that. So no announcements yet, but he did say that I could talk a little bit about it and that it is happening. So I mean, the pandemic has given me the time and the leisure to be able to work, to be able to compose. I'm not interrupted by my own schedule because I'm retired too, so I can do whatever I want anytime. But before the pandemic, my life was pretty well ordered. Cycling at a certain time every day, and visiting friends, going to the gym, and busy going out to dinner, going to lunch, what have you. And often the artistic, the compositional, the sitting at the piano and working, or even just practicing, would go by the wayside. Now I've had this concentrated time to be able to do all this work, and I'm working every day doing those things, which is just kind of, it's the silver lining. I hate being locked indoors. I absolutely hate it. For most of the time, and it's just making me crazy. But still, I've got something. So what is it like for you guys? Vanessa, what about you?
Oh my gosh. It's silver lining is definitely a word that I use, or a phrase that I use way more than I ever thought I would. Initially it was crazy. I think between March, I just started rehearsing a show, and then between March and May of next year, 2021, I had 13 contracts. So I think 11 of those were dialect contracts and 2 were acting contracts.
Wow.
And so they haven't all gone by the wayside. Some of them have been postponed. So and as far as I'm aware, last I heard, are still going to happen at some point. So I know that they're on there. But that was this sort of like loss and grief, and like, what am I going to do? Like, this is what I do. But then I'm like you, with time, I teach too. And so I've been incredibly fortunate that I've been able to continue with almost my full studio of private teaching, all virtual.
Wow, that's great.
So I've been very, very lucky to be able to do that. And the joy of that is that often my students would be auditioning all the time. So we'd be doing audition prep. So we've been able to take a huge step back and really work on technique. And I am thrilled by their progress in lots and lots of ways. and we've talked a lot with students about art and about what it is to be a singer and what it is to be an artist. And I feel like from the little ones all the way up to my grandmas, like we've all grown, which is really a blessing for me. On a totally, completely non-related to theatre note, I also am as you mentioned, I would say an amateur cellist. But I would take like, I don't know, 5 lessons a year, 6 lessons a year. I've been taking weekly lessons and I feel like I am playing better than I've played in my life. I'm playing like concerti. It's exciting. I've never done that. And so I'm like, my God, I'm actually not horrible at this. And so that's like a little personal joy for myself. Not that I'm really ever going to do anything major with it, but I just am like, wow, this is something I never thought I would be able to do. And so that's my personal silver lining.
That's great. We have a comment from Ruth Ann Duncan, who from 2015 to 2019 attended a series of conferences paralleling the years of World War I at Oxford. Needless to say, All Is Calm was particularly poignant for her in the midst of that experience. Yeah, I would guess so. That's exciting. Juan, what about you during the pandemic? How's it been for you?
Well, life is a bit crazy. I've got 2 little ones at home, and so they've been home 24/7 with us. No school. My son is in kindergarten online. So imagine trying to get a 6-year-old on a laptop. 4 or 5 hours a day. It's just kind of crazy. But I've been extremely fortunate. I have 2 steady gigs with the Village Church and Sacra Profana that have continued through this time. And I really had to kind of transition my skill set. I had a little bit of experience with, computer music notation and, Finale, for those of you who are familiar with that stuff. And with audio recording software. And Sacra Profana was really fortunate in that just before everything happened, we recorded a CD along with Peter Rutenberg, who is a Grammy award-winning producer. And so we're in post-production for that. But I got some great recording experience in the midst of that. And so now I've turned almost full-time into an audio editor, engineer here, doing virtual choirs with the Village Church. We produce basically 3 pieces a week. And then with Sacra Profana, we've been fortunate to do a number of different virtual choirs. We did our summer choral intensive with high school students completely online. And then we've been able to commission a couple new pieces. So that's been really exciting.
And we actually have evidence of some early pandemic work that you did with Sacra Profana that I would like to go to now.
Sure.
When I first saw this, and I think you posted it about 2 or 3 months ago.
Yeah.
And it was just so charming because this is a piece that came out of the pandemic. Sacra Profana staff, what do we do? I mean, how do we keep singing? What do we produce? And this is a result. And if you want to dance at home while you're listening to this, you go right ahead. Now, I just want you to understand, Sacra Profana, despite the name, is not one of those groups that just sings Palestrina and Ingegneri at all of their concerts. They're doing a lot of new music. They're doing a lot of interesting arrangements of pieces like this. So, is it Joey that we're talking to ask to show the video?
Our senior Kevin Boudouin.
Kevin. So Kevin, roll it. This is about 5 minutes, but I think you're going to really enjoy it. Now, was that absolutely brilliant? I just love that. It was so much fun. And what a great way to sort of meet the challenge of the pandemic. And Juan, you told me that that is your arrangement
Mhm.
of the song Cars, right?
Yep, yep, yeah. It was
Brilliant.
that
And
was
the drone shots and the photography, it was just total professional level at the top. It was just absolutely wonderful. And everybody is sort of chiming in on chat too. Fabulous. Featuring several Allscom cast
that's
members.
right.
Yes, great. Couldn't agree more. Genius. Yes. We, we should begin each drive-in production with this video. I think you're absolutely right.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. What fun. What
thank you.
great fun.
Yeah.
And I feel the same way about it now, having seen it 10 times as the time that I saw it first a few months back on YouTube. Brilliant.
Thank you.
So finally, I think to bring us all to a conclusion, what's next for you guys? Vanessa, what's coming up next artistically for you?
Well, tomorrow, no, Friday, actually, I've been working with students at Francis Parker High School's drama club. So they're doing a production of Radium Girls, which is a really interesting story about the girls who are the dial painters, the clock face painters who painted with radium, and of course developed cancer, a horrible thing, but how that brought that out into the lawsuit and everything that ensued. So it's a really interesting piece. So I've been working with some high schoolers on that, and so we have I'm actually, as soon as we're done today, I'm hopping on a rehearsal for that, and then they open Friday.
Very
That's
cool.
my next one.
And for you, Juan Carlos, I know you've got something coming up this weekend that we can all enjoy, so let us know about it.
That's right. So Soccer Profana is doing a holiday concert in which we're going to revisit several recordings from our 2019 concert, which many of those pieces are also going to be in our forthcoming CD. And then we do another virtual choir premiere of a piece that we co-commissioned, a setting of In the Bleak Midwinter. So that and that one's completely free. That drops on YouTube on Saturday. So you can check out our website and our Facebook for more information about that.
And the website is sacraprofana.org
Exactly right. Yep.
with the slash between Sacra and Profana.
Nope. Just one word, sacraprofana.org.
Perfect. Okay. Then I'm going to bring this to a close. I want to thank from the bottom of my heart Juan Carlos Acosta and Vanessa Dinning. Thank you both so much for what you brought to our discussion today. Thank you all for coming, for attending, and as I say always, I'll see you at the opera. Thanks, guys. Take care.